どうも、テネシー在住日本人 YouTuber のZackです。早速ですが、来たる11月3日の大統領選挙に向けて、Zackチャンネルでは大統領選挙シリーズということで動画を配信しています。最初の動画ではアメリカ大統領選挙について簡単に解説しています。サクッと分かりやすくまとめておりますので、まず基本情報としてそちらをご覧ください。そしてここ当地アメリカで実際に投票権を持っているアメリカ人の友達6人を対象にインタビューを実施しました。日本にいるとなかなか聞けない有権者の生の声ということで、ぜひ最後まで見ていってください。今回インタビューをしたのはアーロンです。それでは早速どうぞ。
So, Aaron,
Yes.
please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Aaron Browning. I was born and raised in the United States, and since I was 11, I've lived in Tennessee, which is southeastern United States, along with a couple other of my friends who you've interviewed. I have an interest in Japan, amongst many other things, so that has been what I've studied. I've studied the Japanese language, and I should be moving there soon for graduate school. And we both met through the Japanese speaking community here in Middle Tennessee.
Thank you, Aaron, for introduction. Next question.
Mhm.
Who's your president?
And so I will most definitely be voting for Joe Biden as soon as possible. Early voting here in Tennessee starts October 14th. So that's kind of a full 2 weeks and a little bit more. I think approximately 17 days before the November 3rd, the election date. But really that's the final day to vote, right? So yeah, I would like to vote on October 14th if possible, but probably that week I'll be going to the polls. For me personally, I would prefer to vote in person. And that may seem a little bit strange to people, but of course I will be wearing a mask when I go. I would just prefer to actually do it myself, to press the button at the polls, because not to sow distrust necessarily into mail-in voting, but I guess personally it feels better for me to just do that in person.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you. Why him?
That's a very good question. So I would not say that I necessarily identify as a Democrat. I would say that I am left. I would say that I'm liberal. The Democratic Party nominated Joe Biden. Yeah, so I'm left. I wouldn't identify necessarily as a hardcore Democrat by any means. And I think to some extent, there is a disconnect between the young left and the older left. I think a lot of young liberal people, a lot of young progressives like me were voting for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. That was typically what I saw amongst people of my age, and that neither of those turned out to be nominated as the Democratic candidate. They both ended up dropping out of the race. So, of course, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden because, at this point, we have two main candidates, right? And to me, one is clearly better than the other. That's not to say that who becomes president is the only thing that matters in an election, because of course we're also casting our vote for, local districts, for Congress, right? For who our representatives and Senate members are going to be. So I think it's really important, even if you don't necessarily care for either of the two presidential candidates, to really do your work into looking in the platforms of the other people that are on the ballot. Because when you vote, it's not just, choose Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It's, you choose many different people for many different races. So, but yes, I personally voted in the primary. I personally voted for Bernie Sanders because I'm progressive. I think that he has a good track record, and I think he has done a very good job of pinpointing what I see to be a lot of the problems that we're dealing with now, with racial injustice, with wealth and income inequality, with climate change, a lot of those things that, through his campaign, I think he sort of pushed into the forefront. And I think, as a positive, even though he ended up dropping out of the race, I think to an extent, Joe Biden has been prompted to adopt much more progressive policy than he would have. At the same time, are you familiar with the Green New Deal?
New Deal is the Franklin Roosevelt.
Yes. So there's one that Democrats in Congress have come up with called the Green New Deal. So it's sort of hearkening back to that time and saying, okay, we need a new deal. We need a New Deal too. And we need a new deal for climate change. So basically a package of legislation to address this huge problem that we're facing. Because if laws are not made, right, then the problem is just going to get worse.
I see. What is America that you hope for?
That's a good question as well. I was raised with at least the idea of this, or, the ideals of meritocracy, of equal opportunity, of equal access. And of course, the older I've gotten, the more that I see that is not a reflection of reality. It's kind of this false sense of equality and this false sense of pride and this idea of freedom that is very limited. It's a very small and limited idea. But I think because I was raised with those ideals, I've always held them pretty close to my heart. And, my hope is that we live in a country that reflects those values. And there's a lot of work to be done until that has truly become a reality. And I think in many cases we are working against systems, that sort of hold us in place and keep us back from achieving these ideals that we have. I, for one, have grown more and more critical of capitalism as I've gotten older, seeing society kind of just slowly transition into this thing where it's very, very difficult to move out of your current social economic class has been pretty sobering for me, like within the past decade. And I think it's very easy to see if you are like a millennial, like me, growing up in the 90s and then, becoming an adult in the 2000s, where the cost of education is really high, cost of housing is really high, wages are stagnant. You can tend to feel trapped in that system, right? There's similar problems in Japan, right, with the birth decline and things like that, where we have to think about societally, what are we going to do? Because it's literally not sustainable, right? We cannot, if the system that we're working with, if it's capitalism, like we can't continue to just charge people exorbitantly and have everyone be in debt. Like that's not going to work if our system is built on like production and consumerism, right? Because if the people don't have any money to buy those things, then it's just not sustainable. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that it's not sustainable, because then that eventually it prompts us to change the system. But unfortunately for many people, or I guess unfortunately for most people, it takes those systems getting really, really terrible at the expense of the underprivileged until those things change, right? So I want there to be, I want America to be better, I don't think that America is suddenly going to be better after this election. I think it's a start. I think that things would be much, much worse if Donald Trump were to get reelected. But yeah, there's so much work to be done. It's not like any election can fix problems, but I think with this election, we could avoid a major crisis, if Trump loses and is forced to leave the White House.
Do you have a message to the viewers?
Yes, I do. So my message to all of you is it's very easy to be disinterested in politics and think, it doesn't pertain to you and that, like, why vote, why engage in your country's political system. But it's very, very important for more young people to be aware of what's happening in politics. And we're seeing that play out in the United States. If more young people had voted, Trump never would have gotten into office in the first place. Hopefully, I hope that in this election, we're going to see a huge turnout from younger people, an unprecedented turnout, like the likes of which we've never seen before, because of how jarring and how traumatic this entire administration has been. And I just hope that in Japan, it never gets to the point where people have to be sort of scared into going to vote. I hope that it's something where they can look at the United States and look at their own system and say, okay, I do care. I do want to make sure that my voice is being heard, So yeah, I would say if you have the opportunity to be more engaged in what's happening locally in your town, what's happening, in your federal government, then definitely do that because it matters.
Great message.
Thank you.
You have some brief message to your Japanese friend?
残念ながら私の土日は延期になったんですけど、来年3月にまた日本に帰ることを楽しみにしています。またお会いできますように。
Okay, so Aaron, thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, and I'm excited for everyone to see the video.
So thank you, Aaron.
See you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.